Welcome to the All About You podcast. My name is Sheila and I am your host. In this podcast, I invite everyday people to tell their stories of their travels, passions, and what makes them happy. So if you have a story to tell, please contact me on allaboutyoupodcast@yahoo.com and let's tell your story. So now for today's conversation. Welcome to another conversation on the All About You podcast. And I'm delighted to have my guest today, Alan, who is a personal trainer. Alan, welcome to All About You podcast.
Thanks, Sheila. Thanks for inviting me.
I'm very, very much looking forward to this conversation because we are going to dive into the world of being a personal trainer. So, Alan, can you introduce yourself and then we'll get into the conversation?
Sure. Okay, Sheila. Well, my full name is Alan LaRue. I've been here living in Valencia for nearly 15 years, originally from Sydney, and I've been a personal trainer for more than 20 years. I've moved here originally, for family ties, and been working with my clients, for over 12 to 15 years. A lot of them have stayed with me all this time, and I love the Valencian climate, so between here and Sydney, I feel at home.
So, Alan, let's dive into the world of being a personal trainer. What is a personal trainer?
Okay, a personal trainer, Sheila, I would say is a person who could guide you through your exercise, also nutrition. It's a person that you can count on to basically keep you on track in terms of your lifestyle. That is really what a personal trainer, complete personal trainer would do. It's a person that you would work with on a regular basis, and it's a person that you can depend on to keep track on basically how you're going health-wise as well. It's also, a personal trainer is also usually a person with whom you can confide in terms of, because there are a lot of issues with our health sometimes, which we don't necessarily want to share even with our partners or with our family members. Okay, to a great detail, but a personal trainer, we have the commitment to actually get really to the very, very essence of your health and lifestyle, and try to keep you at the best level of lifestyle that you can have.
Yeah. I think during sort of the last 18 months, we have all realised how important our health is. And I think as we get older, we need to put a lot of emphasis on our health. So whether that means exercising, our sleep, our diet, keeping our stress levels down. And I think one of the big things is with exercise, a lot of people need external motivation.
Yes, definitely. That's exactly it. Well, I didn't mention that, but of course a personal trainer is also a big focus on motivation. One of the things that a personal trainer do is actually find out what your motivation is. But at the end of the day, when a personal trainer, when we can give you enough knowledge to start off with about the importance of health, and as you mentioned, Sheila, as we get older, it's really important health-wise, because our bodies, everything about us changes, even our mentality changes. Okay, in some cases it's good because we're more mature to actually take time to understand more about our bodies. Okay, so motivation is a big factor, but I think motivation will come depending on our past as well, because some people have had more experience with exercise and they found that their type of motivation was basically based on a physique sort of motivation. Some people will find that the motivation actually comes from, unfortunately, they could develop a type of disease, so they find out that, hey, I'm motivated to keep living a longer life. Yeah, but one of the important things that I do find when I do work with my clients is that the motivation will, at the end of the day, will come from the feeling of getting more healthier and feeling that, yes, I can do this, I've got more energy. So in the beginning, we do try to find out where your motivation comes from. But at the end of the day, we find that motivation, that primary motivation, takes a secondary, like a back step. And we find that the motivation really at the end of the day is basically feeling more energetic and feeling healthier.
I think it's very interesting, isn't it? Because as we get older, we've gone through sort of different life cycles, and maybe when we were young we used to play lots of team sports. Maybe we used to go to the gym, or you attended a regular class. Life sometimes takes over, but as we get older, it's finding something you enjoy, whether it is exercising as part of a group, whether it's team sports, whether it's doing a video. It's finding what you enjoy.
Very important.
On a regular basis, because there's no point running 5 miles and then 2 weeks later you've done nothing apart from that 5-mile run. So I think one of the secrets is to find what you enjoy.
Very, very important at the end of the day, Sheila, what we enjoy really, because we have to remember that naturally movement is natural for us. It's one of the most natural things we do. Okay, so enjoying it, and actually sometimes I even ask people, okay, what did you used to like to do? Now, we don't necessarily have to go back to that, but we can always find something that's related to that. Okay, so some people will tell me, oh, look, I used to love running. Okay, well, an example, I have a client of mine, he used to love running. So we still run, but we do it in the water. Okay, so it's a lot less impact on the body. Okay, so you can always find, a type of variety in the exercise, but related to something that you used to do. I've actually gotten some of my clients over the age of 60, and I've gotten them back on the tennis court, because they used to love to play tennis, and we've been able to go back and play tennis, but it's been a little bit more modified. Of course, always watching the things that can actually harm rather than, make us feel better. It's something with impact, okay, the amount of impact, and also the resistance, the actual level of the resistance that we're using. Okay, so we do have to adjust depending on the age and the condition, the physical condition of each person.
I think one thing that has really struck me is how much time we spend sitting now. Yeah. Whether you're working in an office or whether you're working at home, we sit to watch TV, we're working, and I know myself, I sort of sit at my desk doing various stuff, and I think, hang on a second, I've sat here for 2 hours and I'm really making an effort. Okay, and I'll often put a thing on my phone. Okay, sit at my desk for 50 minutes and then I'm going to get up, and for 20 minutes, whether it's just pottering around the house or just moving your body.
Yes, definitely. It's I think more and more, and I've always said this to people that are known to my clients, I said, whoever invented the chair, we think that the chair is very, very convenient, very comfortable for us, but really, whoever invented it, it's not so good for us, okay? Because the chair, when we are sitting for long periods of time, if we can imagine, just without even talking about the scientific side of it, but when we're sitting on the chair for such a long period of time, okay, the spine, because the chair gives us support, like automatic support, so we actually tend to switch off that stabilizer, which we've got naturally, okay, in the core, okay, in the mid part of the body and in the spine. And of course, we start to slouch because we get more comfortable and we think, oh, this is comfortable, this is great. But that slouching, even for more than 30 to 40 minutes, is actually detrimental, okay, for the back and also for our health. So actually, you mentioned that, and I actually I designed some videos mainly for my clients where it's actually designed for them to get up for real time 3 minutes, and it's designed so that they get up every 45 minutes and move for 3 minutes. And there are different types of movements. That's if they themselves don't find something else to do. Even if it just lasts for 3 to 5 minutes in between, I do recommend every 30 to 40 minutes we should stand up. But one of the big problems nowadays, Sheila, as you can imagine, is being sedentary, okay, sitting for long periods of time. And in the end, it's not just the back. In the end, for women, they begin to have problems even with the neck, okay, because we're often looking down on our computer or we're doing some work on our desk. And then we also have problems which already comes usually after the age of 40. We begin to have a few more problems with the shoulder joint, okay, and that's from the shoulders being slouched, okay, and those things, sitting down doesn't help, okay.
It's so interesting you saying this, because the other day I was reading an article and it was saying sitting is the new smoking.
Yes.
And when you think about it,
yeah,
we are spending so much time sitting. And I know myself now, I'm trying to do a podcast standing up, or if I'm doing a Skype call, okay, I'm going to stand up and do it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it takes a bit of adjustment to do that. But you are moving. You are not sitting.
Exactly. You're not sitting down. And even our social gatherings, okay, with some of my clients, they say to me, oh, look, yes, tomorrow I'm going to meet up with some friends and we're going to have a coffee, whatever. We're going to have a chat. And when you think about it, they could be chatting there, sitting for 2 hours. So I've suggested to some of my clients, well, why don't you meet and go for a soft walk? And you can still chat. An example is, okay, well, look, we're going to meet up for coffee, but okay, well, we'll meet up where we're going to meet up originally, but why don't we walk for 15 minutes, come back for another 15 minutes, and then we'll sit down and keep chatting.
I mean, that's so easy to do. Okay, Alan, well, let's imagine we've got our typical male and female person, 40 plus. What do they need to concentrate on in respect of cardio, flexibility, stretching?
Okay.
What are we going to do with our 40 plus people?
Okay, firstly, Sheila, we have to remember, on average, after the age of 40, okay, the main things that begin to show signs of wear and tear is usually, as I mentioned before, in the shoulders, an area, a very, very important area, the shoulders, because we're using our hands all day, okay, that's how we are as being humans. So shoulders, they begin to take its toll. That's just with age. I guess we're talking about the rotator cuff. So talking about some movements with the shoulders, usually if we have to reach behind us or we have to reach a little bit higher than the horizontal, okay, a bit higher than the shoulder height. Secondly, the knees, they begin to, just because the cartilage in our bodies, they begin to deteriorate and we start to feel that in the knees. Thirdly, the ankles as well, okay, and this is a natural thing for over 40s, okay, and it's basically because of the wear and tear. We have to remember that the ligaments, okay, and the tendons at the age of 40, they're not as flexible anymore, and so they're not as elastic, okay, and also bone density and muscle density, they begin to come down after the age of 40. So we're talking about the structure of the body, okay, these changes. So having those things in mind, at the age of 40, it's very important, starting from the basic, very important that we keep up our elasticity and flexibility. When we talk about flexibility, is the range of movement of the joints. And obviously, we do need to make sure that the quality of our muscles, okay, that they're in good shape. So we have not only the exercise, but the nutrition side. So for people over the age of 40, we have to make sure that our exercise, number one, is something that's functional. When I talk about functional, it's really what's going to enhance and help us structurally, okay, to be more balanced, number one, and to have more stability, okay. Oh, and the other thing that I forgot to mention is in the shins and feet, after the age of 40, we could develop what we call hairline fractures. And that's basically because where the actual tendons meet the bone, because those tendons and the bones have less density, just with a harsh movement or impact movement, they can cause stress fractures, which are hairline fractures. So that's the other thing. So what we really need to make sure is that we're doing functional exercise. That means exactly that we need to be working on our stability. So we're talking about isometric exercise. Isometric exercise is basically where you are in a fixed position without moving any limbs, and then you make an effort. So whether it's pushing or pulling, or basically just standing with your feet apart, okay, hands up at a horizontal height, and you keep that position for about 20 to 30 seconds. That's an example of an isometric exercise, okay? That's number one. Number two, we have to make sure that our elasticity and our flexibility, joint flexibility, is at a good level. Okay, number three, we have to make sure that our cardiovascular work is constant. Okay, because we have to remember that even the chemical reactions in the body, they're not the same as when we're in our 20s and 30s. Okay, they're a little bit slower. Oxidants take longer to be processed. Okay, even the processing of things like protein, it takes a little bit longer. So we really have to make sure that our exercise and our movement is functional. Strength-wise, strength is also, when we talk about strength, I tend to talk a little bit more, not brute strength, but I talk about the strength, again, of our stability. How hard can I push against the wall, for example, but neuromuscular work, meaning that I'm aware when I'm pushing with my hands, I'm aware when I'm pushing with my shoulders, I'm aware when I switch my glutes on, and I'm aware when I switch my calf muscles on. So we really have to work on the neuromuscular side as well, because the better we've got that working in terms of our nervous system, the better we're going to be stabilized. Okay, and it's all about your stability, especially at the age of 40, and it's all about really regular movement. And I can define for you later on down the line what I mean when I say movement and when I talk about exercise.
I am still focusing on what you said about shoulders and ankles. Yeah. I think we often, when we talk about, I've got a problem with my knees, this time, knees seem to be the first thing that go. Ankles and shoulders, never even considered it.
Yeah, very, very important, because the ankles and shoulders are quite complex. Okay, they're quite complex. And really we forget about them, but even just talking about the ankles, we're on our ankles and we're carrying on our ankles and on our feet our full weight all day, every day, everywhere we go. Okay, but we often forget about them, but we have to remember the ankles from when we're born. Okay, Sheila, we all know this, we have a certain way of walking. Okay, and that's fine. Sometimes people have a certain gait, okay, walking outwards with one foot and the other. Okay, so one of the things that I do with my clients, depending, regardless of age, is actually having a look at how they walk and how they use the ankles. We have to remember that we're all connected. So the ankles are connected to the knees, connected to the hips, and connected to the shoulders. So from the ankles to the shoulders, they're key points, because if you have a problem, from young, if you're walking a certain way, that's all right when we get right up to our 30s, 35, 36, that's okay. That's not going to do us too much harm if we don't aggravate it too much. But getting into the 40s, we have the supporting tissues, muscles, ligaments, tendons, a little bit weaker. And if you have a little bit of an angle or a certain way of walking, and it's repetitive, when we walk, it's exactly the same thing. Well, you know what's going to have to compensate for that? Your shoulders and your neck, the position of your neck. Because if you don't, you can literally fall over. But because it's instinctive for us, if you walk a certain way, it's okay, I can stay up on my feet. But at the end of the day, what's going to compensate for the way that you walk are your shoulders and your neck and your upper body. So that's why we find the shoulders, and the shoulders being a very complex set of joints, we feel the deterioration more in those, because we use the shoulders all the time. We use our arms all the time, our hands. And for them to work, the shoulders got to work. So they're really, really the big structure. It's like the foundation of our skeletal structure, the way that we move. As I said, we carry our full weight on our ankles, and the shoulders will regulate or compensate for the way we walk. And the shoulders are always in use, because we use our arms and hands. So we find that those are the first indicators when we get over the 40s.
I think we've all walked past a shop window, looked at our reflection and thought, oh my God, who is that person hunched over, exactly. Jaw sticking out, and we're like, oh, and you stop and you straighten everything up and you think, okay. Exactly. And then we just sort of slump back into our natural...
Yes, one of the things that I do with my analysis of posture is that I give people 3 things to think about as a reminder. Okay, Sheila. Number 1 is we have to make sure that when we walk, the knees don't necessarily stretch out completely. They should never be fully straight when we walk. And unless we pay attention to them, some people will walk their stride and their knee at one given point, especially when we're pushing off the back leg, they will actually straighten up fully. And I'll explain why this is important. So the first thing I say to people is that we have to soften the knees. And I'll explain in a bit why. Second thing that I tell people is that men or women, we have to make sure that our shoulders are nice and opened. Simple to say, but it's actually complex to try to remind us how to do it. What I mean by shoulders are open, because people say, oh, well, I'll lift my chest up. Well, the thing is, it's not actually lifting. It's basically just making sure that our shoulders, if we look along the side of our shoulders and into the chest, usually a lot of the time we'll see a little bit of an angle with the shoulder coming in, okay? And that actually is the worst thing we can do, because just on the top of the shoulders are the trapezius, which connects straight to the neck. And if we have those shoulders coming forward, that's pulling on the trapezius all the time. And so we have a reflex pain eventually on the back of the neck. And having the shoulders coming forward, the third point that I remind people, is then the head comes forward. And to remind us about the head coming forward is I suggest to people, remember with your index finger, put it there in the middle of your chin, and now and then push back. Okay, so soft knees, shoulders back, not lifted, just back, and your index finger in the middle of your chin, now and then when you remember, and just push back lightly. So they're the most basic things without going into detail, but usually I remind that with all my clients, and I find that if people are more aware of those 3 points, in little time, in 2 to 3 weeks, can actually adjust their posture. And then if there's other adjustments needed, well, obviously we talk about manipulation from physio, okay, and we talk about exercises which complement those 3 things with posture.
I mean, posture is everything. And the world we live in now, there are these sofas that are basically like beds.
The worst. Yeah.
People sort of slump on them, and particularly now, our neck is always thrown forward because we're all scrolling on our street. I mean, the whole setup with your typical sofa is to slump, to lay, to... Horrible.
When we're talking about postures, Sheila, I if we're really conscious about our posture, I do suggest to people, considering the lifestyles these days, okay, like a lot of people are probably tired coming from work and they'll get home, they'll see the sofa, great, I'm going to slouch on the sofa. That's fine as long as you're conscious about how long you're on there, or you're in the sofa, I should say, because you literally can disappear inside the sofa. What I do suggest to a lot of people, a very practical thing, is either have a seat without a backrest, okay, so just a seat like a stool, or have basically like a type of a ball, like a Pilates ball, and making sure that every single day you spend a little bit of time on there. It could be an hour if you're watching TV, just sit on there, because it's very, very hard to slouch on there. You'll be more aware of what your back is doing. So for example, on a stool without a backrest, well, you're more reminded to actually sit there, because you can't slouch in there. You can spend an hour or 45 minutes there a day, but at least you're getting, the erector muscles alongside your spine are being basically stimulated. Or on a Pilates ball, which literally, if you slouch on there for too long, you'll just fall off. So I've even suggested for people to have it in their office. Okay, so you have a certain period of time during the day, we say, it's time for me to sit on the Pilates ball, okay, for 30 to 40 minutes. And it's just a reminder, because we have to remember that our stabilizers around our core, they're actually what we call involuntary muscles. So they work without us having to switch them on. But guess what happens when we're given a backrest? We just switch them off. And that's where the trouble begins. That's where we start getting even sciatic problems. That's when we start getting problems even with protrusions of the disc on the spine. That's when we start getting even shoulder and neck problems. Okay, so really you're right, Sheila, that the way they design them, the couches now and the lounges, it doesn't do us any favour.
I love the idea about the ball. I think that is simple, it is brilliant, and it's going to make you so aware of how you are sitting.
Oh, yeah.
You cannot slouch if you've got a ball in your back. Can we talk about balance? Because as we get older, we've all heard a lot of people have a fall as they get older, and that often can lead to really serious problems. How can we improve our balance? Is there something we can do for a few minutes on a daily basis that's going to make a difference? Something simple. For the posture, we've got the ball in the back, which is absolutely brilliant. Okay, let's have some advice on our balance.
Okay. First and foremost, Sheila, before talking about the physical side, I do always recommend for people to check out their vitamin D. Okay, because we don't actually realise this, but the vitamin D has a lot to do with our balance. Okay, it's actually very, very important because the vitamin D helps us have that feeling about our balance, because the vitamin D actually is a component of the bone as well, okay, and stability. And that's why the first thing I tell you, make sure that we're getting a good amount of vitamin D. Secondly, on the physical side, because we don't realize that sometimes with vitamin D that we are deficient in vitamin D, and it does affect our balance. Okay, number two, on the physical side, very, very simple thing, a few simple things that we can do is, the first thing is, okay, when I talk about balance, I want to switch on, obviously, the mind. It's a neuromuscular thing because, besides and around all our joints, we have this nervous system, and they work as radars, indicators. Okay, so that's why vitamin D affects it, because it affects the nervous system as well. Because these radars, if I'm leaning over, or if I'm going to fall over, and we'll find a lot of people are about to fall over their ankle, and then they're able to recover. Okay, that's something to do with our nervous system, because the sensitivity of these radars around the joints, okay, have to be there. But guess what? If we haven't stimulated these, what we can call little radars, okay, around the joints for a long time, then they also lose quality. Okay, so how can we practice it? Very, very simple. First thing is, and very simple at home, we'll stand in parallel. We're standing up, okay, with the 2 feet in parallel. And the first thing that I tell people is, okay, stand there, bend our knees slightly. To start off with, we can feel and really think about it. Feel the maximum amount of surface on our feet. So we can do this without any shoes on, barefoot, and just feel it, the maximum amount of surface on the bottom of our feet touching the ground. That's first, foremost. After we do that, we bend our knees slightly. Okay, and we will stay in that position. We will hold our hands up to the front horizontally, both arms stretched out. And firstly, we will stay there for a good 15 to 20 seconds. But we will keep feeling the pressure on both feet, maximum amount of surface on the soles of the feet. That's number one. We can do that 4 to 5 times. Okay, bouts of 10 to 20 seconds, then we relax a little bit, then we get in that position again and we repeat it. Okay, the next thing we can do, once we've been able to do that with no problems, is the same position, feeling the sole of our feet, and then we will basically lift one foot a few centimeters from the ground. This time the arms are going to be stretched out to the sides, and we'll use the arms as a balancing tool. First and foremost, the sensitivity. We will keep thinking about the soles of the feet. Once we've done that a couple of times, we're going to swap to the other foot, and once again it's 10 to 20 seconds on each foot. Okay, thirdly, once we're able to do that, then we can then get one of our feet, instead of just lifting it up, we'll stretch it out to the front. 10 to 20 seconds as well. We'll do that 2 to 3 times on each side. Okay, so those are your very basic ones. I'll tell you why it works, because when we bend our feet and we put our full weight on one foot, we're not just stabilizing with the foot, we are now switching on the stabilizers around the knees, around those very, very prone places, which are the hips and also the back. Okay, so let's remember that when we are being able to stand already on one foot, we're switching on the whole chain, right up to the shoulders, right up to the neck. Once we're able to do that, the last thing is very, very basic, and I often question why there's not an open program about this or more propaganda about it, because it's a really easy thing to do. Is basically, okay, we're going to stand up comfortably next to a wall. Okay, so we're standing perpendicular to the wall. For example, one of our shoulders closest to the wall. We're about 10 centimeters, our feet are about 10 centimeters from the bottom of that wall. Once we're standing straight, we're going to lean. So we're going to be leaning with the shoulder against the wall. Once we're leaning against the wall, we're going to push against the wall. In that small space against the wall, we're going to push with our shoulders. We're going to keep pushing. Now, the effort is about a 6 or a 7 out of 10 when we're pushing against the wall. The only rule is, when we push against the wall, we do not let our hip closer to the wall. We don't let it touch the wall. Okay, so we're only touching the wall with our shoulder. We push for 10 to 20 seconds, regular breathing. Doesn't have to be deep breathing, regular breathing. Keep pushing for 10 to 20 seconds, relax. Repeat it on the other side. And we will repeat that as well 3 to 4 seconds. Very simple, very effective, because in those types of positioning of the body, we are switching on all the stabilizers, and that's something we can all do at home. Very easy.
I think it's so interesting when you talk at the very beginning, having your feet flat on the floor, so your whole foot is in contact with the floor. Just by looking at the heels on our shoes, we can often see I walk to sort of the outer right, the inner left, yes. I walk on my toes. Yes. Just by looking at our shoes, that will indicate where we generally put our weight. And actually, I should imagine it's quite a difficult exercise to try and evenly distribute the weight just on the soles of your feet. Yeah. That's really going to make you think, because you're going to go into your natural default position. Of course. As I said, from when we're born, we walk a certain way. Yeah. So one of the things I put a lot of importance on is when I train my clients, or when I talk to everybody, to a lot of my friends, I always tell them, well, be aware of that. It's not that necessarily, if it's not creating a problem for the rest of the body, for the knees, for the hips, it's okay, but we have to be aware of that, because at the end of the day, if we want to keep having an efficient type of movement during the day, functional movement, we start from the very bottom. Okay, we start from where we make contact with the ground. Okay, and it's a habit. It's a long life habit that we've been doing. So to change it is very, very difficult. But one of the things is I do like to make that analysis, because then it also indicates to me where a person needs to improve their strength or their elasticity or their, or their functionality. Because a lot of people, from the way they walk, they will either favor another part of their body, whether it's the quadriceps, whether it's whether it's your hamstrings, or whether it's your lower back, depending on how far you're stretching your ankles and your knees, you will favor a certain part of your body. When I talk about symmetry in the body, it actually doesn't exist. Each side of the body is completely different. But when I talk about symmetry, it's more on a neuromuscular basis. When I said feel both sides evenly, okay, it's more your perception. Because if your perception is that you're evenly distributing the weight on both feet, then you have symmetry in your thought, which means you are indicating on an equal level, nervous level, to those 2 feet that you want them to be equal. And it's this symmetrical balance at the end of the day, when we're talking about muscular structure and joint stability, that's really, really important. We need to perceive that in terms of neuromuscular, right? Because that's our strength. Our strength is symmetry. In inverted commas, I say that because symmetry doesn't exist. That's where differently one side or the other. But that perception of symmetry, at the end of the day, we're going to be more conscious that, hey, this side, I'm favoring this side more than the other. And I've often said to people, well, does that matter? I said, it does matter when we get, especially when it creates injury or when we're recovering from an injury. We have to remember that one side or one type of muscle, primary muscle that we use, always has an opposite and almost equal motion. So when we're talking about the feeling out of one side and the other, we're really wanting to indicate that's the neuromuscular work. At the end of the day, that's what's going to save us from being injured in the long run, even up to our 80s, 90s, right? We're talking about age. So can we now just talk about a general sort of exercise program, what we should be doing on a basic week to sort of make sure everything's okay, whether that's the cardio, the flexibility. Yeah. Let's talk about, an ideal week.
Okay. An ideal week for us is to actually get 2 to 3 times, and I will define these for you because there are different meanings or different myths about some of these. Okay, it's important that the type of exercise that we do does obviously include stretching, okay? And I'll explain a little bit later the importance of that. Stretching, which just means, stretching doesn't mean necessarily our typical, where we got our feet apart and we're stretching side to side, hamstring stretching. Stretching, this is for all ages. When I talk about stretching, I tend to talk about general movement, Because really, even just walking, gentle walking to start off with, is actually a type of stretching, because we're starting to stretch the muscles. You know, obviously, if we talk about from a sleeping and then when we wake up, stretching in this case from the beginning just means movement. It doesn't have to be long movements, and walking short steps, it's a type of stretching. Okay, so if we're talking about stretching the muscle, we need to elongate. Okay, so every movement that we make in reality is stretching. Like walking, for example, I can start walking softly and I'm starting to stretch even the smallest muscle groups in the body. And this is why that's why I wanted to tell you, to say that to you, because there's this myth about types of stretching, because we have static stretching where we're in a certain position, we're not moving, we just hold the stretch there. Then there is the stretching where we actually reach out to a point and come back, so we're in movement, constant movement. Then there's the stretching that's very, very, very seldom talked about, and it's actually PNF. It's I won't even tell you what that's abbreviation for, but the PNF basically is we get to in inverted commas, we get to a stretch where we perceive that that's close to our maximum stretch, and then from there we make an effort, or we make that muscle work, we put it under load. Now, having said about those three types of stretching, we often forget that every time we move, for us to be able to move, the muscle has to stretch. The joints have to stretch. So the ideal is, that's why I say this to people, because not many people will have access to good information or reliable information about really how to stretch. And the level of stretching depends on our physical condition. And we go back to the point that you need personal trainer, or you need someone who can really tell you, okay, Sheila, well, we've done your analysis. Now we can do this type of stretching, and we can take your stretching to this level. Because sometimes, and often, we get injured from doing a type of stretching. So I would recommend that, firstly, in a week, going back to your question, I would recommend that people are able to move first, whether it's walking, whether it's very, very light. You can be sitting and doing this, okay? So older people, or people who have less mobility, you can be sitting and moving, and just moving your limbs, bending the knees, lifting the arms to front, to the back. This is a form of stretching also. And I tend to recommend this to people, so they should be doing that at least 3 times a week. Okay, whether it's static stretching, whether it's a stretching class, okay, or whether it's walking without doing it too fast, that's also a form of stretching for us. 3 times a week. Twice a week, I would recommend that we do cardio training. And as I mentioned to you before, Sheila, when we before we started the podcast, and I did comment to you, I wanted to get rid of some myths about cardio work. Okay, firstly, I'd like to define, when we talk about cardiovascular work, in a lot of people's mind, it's going to come, running.
Yeah.
Typically, okay, or cycling, or jogging. Cardio. I'm going to clear one thing up. Cardiovascular stimulation basically means that you take your heart rate a little bit higher than what your normal sitting heart rate is, and you take a little bit higher for a given amount of time. So I actually do cardio workout with a lot of my clients in a space of 2 meter by 3 meter. People say, that's not cardio, you're not running, you're not jogging. Well, let's remember, cardio is taking your heart rate up to a bit higher, 10 to 20% higher than your normal heart rate, okay, per minute, taking it up a little bit higher and doing it for a certain period of time, whether it's 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, without talking about the recommendations of the length of cardio. But cardiovascular workout is basically moving to provoke that your heart rate goes up higher than your 10 to 20%, up to 30, up to 40, depending on what your objectives are, a little bit higher than what your normal heart rate is. And then later on, we'll talk about the actual recommended heart rate to get a good cardiovascular workout. I'll explain to you. Every person at a certain age has what we call a maximum recommended heart rate. Okay, that's actually basically calculated depending on your age, and we're going to take 60 to 70 to 80% of what your maximum heart rate recommended is. We talk at a cardiovascular workout, we're talking about 50 to 60%, a little bit higher than what your median heart rate is. But really, for a normal person, average person, without going into science, basically get your heart rate up. I have some clients of mine who basically just do a fast walking on the spot for 30 to 40 minutes, lifting their knees and elbows, okay, up high. And when you feel that you're starting to puff a little bit, that's usually fine. Or if you're walking with a person, with a friend, and you're walking and you're still able to talk, but you can feel that, oh yeah, well, I need to sometimes stop to get my breath, that's perfect. And if you can do that for anywhere between 20 to 30 to 40 minutes, 2 to 3 times a week, that's your basis for cardio workout.
I mean, I think that is so interesting what you say. When we often talk about cardio, we think, oh, someone's going to be jogging for an hour, running hell for leather, doing some high impact aerobics class. If that's what you want to do, fine. But I think, as you say, walking, remaining in a heart zone where you can comfortably chat to somebody, or you might say, okay, let's speed it up a bit now as you've warmed up the body. But that's great. That's exercising, you're out in the fresh air, social contact.
It's the best, yes, the best. Look, I can't stress enough that nearly everybody, we are all equipped with all the equipment that we'll ever need. And you know, one of the exercises I recommend for any age is walking. And people tell me, walking?
And it's free.
And it's free. No, walking, because, as I said, the majority of people, unless we have, you know, certain disabilities or whatever, but the majority of people, look, you can walk. And you know what? It's at your control. We've been doing it since we were children, since we were babies, nearly babies. You walk, and you know what? You want a higher intensity walk, you just walk faster. Or you take longer steps, or you lift your knees a little bit higher, or you lift your arms a little bit higher. You walk like soldiers if you like. Also, you can walk backwards. And why walking? Because walking is a type of exercise. Number one, movement-wise, it's the most natural thing for us. Number two, low impact. This is what I stress upon people. The amount of impact at any age can be and will be detrimental for anybody and everybody in the long run. People who come to me and say, oh, I want to get really, really fit. I want to run. Okay, for those people, for the high end, I tend to recommend to them to use interval training, which is, it's controlled. You'll be walking fast for a certain period of time, then you'll do a little fast jog. But of course, before all of that, I analyze the way they run. Okay, as always, my aim here, Sheila, is not to create injuries, and definitely not to create bad habits. So I show people, and people laugh when I tell them, because they don't actually realize what it is. I show people how to improve their walking technique, and I show people how to improve when the time comes, if they do want to jog or want to run. I always recommend what I call a lazy boxer's run, where we're actually jogging, being very, very aware of how much we bend our knees and how much we absorb each stride, and also how much surface, okay, on the soles of our feet we're making contact with the ground. It's very important that we're aware how much and how well we're absorbing that impact. But otherwise, look, in general for everybody, I don't know how much more emphasis I can put on it. Walking, the most natural thing, and you can do 5 days a week if you want to. You can even walk every day. Okay, and do it at different, obviously, depending on how tired we are, at different levels. Some people will walk 20 minutes. Some people will walk even up to 1 hour a day, and you don't need anything. Good, comfortable pair of shoes. Trainers, I do recommend, if you're going to walk for more than 20 minutes, 25 minutes, bring a small bottle of water with you, and you can even do it with a friend. And you can both get fit at the same time. You can be chatting, you're in fresh air, you get a lot more oxygen, you're outdoors, okay? And you know, you can enjoy really the fresh air, and it's something that's comfortable. Some people like to listen to music when they're walking, and really that's when I say we've got no excuse for not doing exercise.
I think it's been very interesting, Alan, all the ideas and options you've given us, using the wall in your house, balancing, going for a walk, you have not talked about one piece of equipment apart from the ball. And that's going to make a huge difference on a daily basis.
Exactly. One of my methods that I do promote on video channels is actually, it's called poor man's workout. Okay, and poor man's workout is basically it. That is it. Anywhere, anytime, with or without equipment, you can actually train. What I mean by this is, as you've just said, you actually absolutely don't need anything. Just for food for thought, really, if we analyze this, and I was just commenting this to one of my clients before I got here, and I was just saying again, and I say this again and again and again. Why, the question is, why do we want to make ourselves less efficient than what we really are? What do I mean by that? The body is already the most complex. If we just talk about mechanical advantage and we talk about biomechanical movements, the body is the most complex thing on earth. Machines are based, like the normal lever and fulcrum to get mechanical advantage, okay, is based on the movement of the body. The body already has it all. And yet we invent machines or apparatus which actually makes us do a movement that's so simple in comparison to what we can already do. Okay, so it's really crazy because the body's so complex. Okay, I mean, can you imagine a joint, the shoulder joint, can rotate 360 degrees, you know, and at the same time, it can actually grab with a hand something. Or I can with my elbow, I can actually make my elbow point to one side and grabbing with the hand and rotating at the same time. The body's so complex as it is already, it doesn't need really any type of apparatus or machines for it to move. Obviously, we talked about it earlier, motivation. But what we forget is the modern world makes us more lazy. Now, I do agree, technology is great because it facilitates for a lot of things. For example, for communication, etc. But you know, I also say that technology is making us lazier and making our own self, our physical self, well, physiological self, lazier each time. It's making us obsolete. And we're seeing the results of it. You know, when we talk about jobs-wise, you know, people are becoming more obsolete because they've got a robot or they've got something mechanical that's doing it. But really, nothing matches, in this day and age, nothing matches the complexity, the mechanical, only the mechanical. We're not even talking about the neuromuscular type, but just the mechanical side of the body. So we have everything that we need. And that's why, in most cases, we do need, if we wanted to get more out of it, we do need a personal trainer to show us how to do that. And my aim here in the long run, I say to all my clients, my aim is, you know, in the long run, you're not going to need me because basically I've just reminded you and I've given you a little bit more knowledge on really how well you can do it yourself just with the body. But, you know, we don't need to buy anything there. As you said, if we wanted to, we can buy a ball, Pilates ball, or we can have a stool without a backrest. Everything else is, you know, already we've got it at home. The lounge itself, the couch, how can we use the couch? Well, sitting in the couch, but without leaning on the backrest and just getting up 30 times, getting up and sitting down. We've got it all there.
I mean, that in itself is something so simple.
It's simple.
But I bet a lot of us would struggle with doing that exercise.
I know. It's something that I think it's just because, as I said, it's the way we've evolved as humans. We've evolved with a lot of comforts. Why do I have to sit up and I'm already sitting down uncomfortable? But at the end of the day, I think we need to be aware that we cannot forget, I think never forget, that we're so lucky as humans because we're given a body that's really made for movement. And just like a machine, if you don't use that machine, if you don't, start your car regularly, the motor's going to seize. In our case, it's very similar. If you don't keep switching on those muscles, those bones, you need to put them under pressure sometimes, those ligaments. It not only affects not just the outer part of us, but the inner part. Okay, our organs need us to move. Cardiovascular system, it needs movement. The brain needs movement. So everything depends, at the end of the day, primarily on movement. Okay, and as a personal trainer, the only thing that we make sure of is the quality of movement that we do is correct, so that we don't, create injuries. But really, Sheila, I can't stress enough that we are made to move. If we weren't, we wouldn't have, we wouldn't be able to bend our elbows. We wouldn't have more than 30 to 40 muscles in our hands. We wouldn't have up to 60 muscles in our feet. We wouldn't have more than 640 muscles in our bodies. It's telling us already in our face we're more than 40 muscles there just to smile. We're made of those muscles, and we need to keep them supple. We need to keep them strong. And going into the 40s really doesn't mean we have more disadvantages. It just means that we need to even be more aware of how important movement really is. And it doesn't really matter whether we've done exercise or movement previous to the age of 40. It just means that, yes, look, we need to be more aware because we need to keep them in better shape. And that's to prolong, really, a quality of life more than anything. There's that saying that, we always say it, over the age of 50, when you get up and you don't have any aches and pains, it means you're dead. This is what they say.
That's what they say.
So really, the importance is just movement, Sheila. It's really important that we move, and we can really do everything at home. We have everything at home. So I often laugh. Well, I know it's there. It's part of the society now. Treadmills. Treadmills make us walk on the same spot, but treadmills, in the long run, can create injury. Because as we talked about it, if we have a certain gait, a certain way of walking, number one, it's repetitive. Okay, we might do those steps, we might keep doing that for 1,000 times in a session of 40 to 50 minutes on the treadmill. And guess what? On top of that, it's weakening us because the bottom of our feet, it's moving for us. It's like the pavement is moving for us, so it's not creating any strength. But if we did that outdoors, we need strength to keep striding. So that's one of the things that I say about treadmills. It's crazy. We've got the outdoors, we've got our feet, we've got everything that we need, we've got our whole body. We don't need anything more. And if we do need to consult with a personal trainer, well, good, great, because we can just make sure that we're not. And of course, there are people who have higher objectives. Personal trainers can do that for you. Keep an eye on everything. We also give recommendation on nutrition, and it's the important thing that we're going the right way about it.
Alan, this has been such an interesting conversation. Your message is the body is meant to move, and our daily life with the comfy sofas, the sofas we can slouch on, we're spending hours in front of the computer. The body is meant to move.
That's all it is. Body's meant to move. So we've got to make sure that we move it. Movement is life. Life is movement. And there's no other way around it. Movement is life. So we've got to keep moving and enjoy our movement. And many people, once they start to move, it's a nice circle. Instead of being a vicious circle, it's a nice circle. Once we start to move, okay, everything begins to improve. Your energy levels begin to improve. If you do it on a regular basis, your body actually starts to look for that activity. Okay, it's a good social thing as well, because when we move, we get around and we'll meet somewhere, we'll go for a walk, very good. And once we get our energies up, from that point on, we can really appreciate a better quality of life. And it's all about movement, from the very simple movement, from the complex movement. Movement is life.
Right, so the body is meant to move. That's going to be our mantra. Alan, thank you so much for being a guest on the All About You podcast.
Pleasure, Sheila, and hope we'll speak again soon.
I hope you have enjoyed the conversation. Don't forget, if you have a story you would like to tell, please get in touch. My email address is allaboutyoupodcast@yahoo.com, and thank you for listening.